Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Get Your Shit Together Man show. I am your host, Aaron Alanis. Now, today we're going to be talking about how you can change your life instantly by doing one simple thing. And this simple thing has helped me go from point A to point B several times in my life and got me from 220 pounds, overweight, depressed, anxious, no friends, no social life, whatever the case may be. I went from that version of myself to where I'm at today, to where a lot of those things are kind of figured out now. And that whole point of this podcast is really helping guys go from A to B, regardless of where you're at. So whether you're trying to go from financially comfortable to more abundant, hey, that's kind of like where I'm trying to go right now. You can follow me along the journey and we can get there together, right? If you're trying to go from stuck to momentum, I'll help you get there. And if you're trying to go from fat to fit, guess what? This podcast is actually built by my online personal training company called Basics, right? So Basics is an online personal training group where we help guys build their best body ever within 16 weeks or less. To find out more information to see if or how you qualify for Basics, one of our VIP coaching programs, go ahead and book a free 15-minute game plan call with myself personally using the second link that you see in the video description of this video. And if you're wanting to learn more about how I went from average to alpha and how I've helped guys do the same exact thing, go ahead and check out the free webinar that we have below. It'll be the very first link that you see. And let's dive right into today's video right now. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for encouraging me to get back on the microphone and back on the podcast format, because here's the thing. In all my friend groups, everyone's been telling me, man, you got to get back on the content. And when it comes down to kind of my strengths, guys, speaking has always been something that's been it's always come very easily to me. And there's definitely been periods in my life to where I've kind of taken that for granted, right? So much so that once I started learning about YouTube videos here and there, I started wanting to kind of mold my strengths around a certain format, and that made the process just so much more difficult for me to even begin. Truth be told, when I started recording this first episode and that we're going to be relaunching, revamping, whatever the case may be, I had a script on my phone, and I was trying to do it, and then I was just like, you know what? This ain't working. So I just kind of turned my phone on airplane mode, kept it at arm's distance. That way I can just kind of speak to you all directly. And that's really what I want to do, because with everything that we have going on nowadays, I just want to be able to give as much of myself as possible without any of the headaches. So these podcasts for the time being aren't going to be the most edited or the most this or the most that. It's going to be raw value that you can just kind of listen to in the background, that you can just listen to when you're driving. And, that's what it's going to be for now. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. So when it comes down to how I changed my life back in the day, guys, it really happened instantaneously once I made one simple decision, right? But before we get into that, because it's a decision that I've had to make several times over in my life, and it's something that I've noticed between the greatest people out there that just know how to do it on a moment's notice, right? So to give you all some context, when I was in high school, right, I was someone that didn't really have a strong sense of identity yet. So because of that, I went from click to click to click to click. I tell people all the time that if you ask people that I went to school with, who Aaron Alanis was. If you ask 20 different people, you would honestly get 20 different answers. And the reason being is because I was trying as many things as possible, man. I tried every single sport out there. I talked to every single girl that I wanted to. I was trying to make friends with every single person that I could. And the biggest thing that I'm grateful for is that I left it all out on the field, metaphorically speaking, right? Meaning if there was ever a sport I played, I at least showed up for a trial. If there was ever a girl I wanted to holler at back in the day, I went ahead and went for it. And if there's ever a friend that I wanted to kind of at least reach out to see if we can kind of, just be tied or whatever, I at least tried, right? So like I'm going to die with zero regrets in those areas of my life, just because I'm very happy with my ability to take risks and fill in the blank, which we'll be talking about today, right? But when I was in high school, I was someone that understood the power of status. And the reason I'm saying I understood the power of status is for those of you all that study human nature, guys like Robert Greene, people that kind of understand human psychology, whatever the case may be. I remember at the time when I was in high school, right? I used to play cello, meaning when I was growing up, I used to play guitar, bass, and I was kind of very, very creative in that realm. And because I was very creative, I wanted to do orchestra, and I was kind of wanting to go down that road. But you can call this insecure, you can call it whatever you want, but looking back, I don't regret my decision, right? Because I think what happens is that many times we don't understand what's going to necessarily give us the best life as people in general. A lot of people think that it's going to be chasing their passion or following their dreams. But when you look up guys that have studied human biology and human psychology and just, things like that, people like Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time, and he says that guys feel the most happy when they're on the top of the dominance hierarchy, and then they feel the most miserable when they're at the bottom of the dominance hierarchy. Meaning that if you're a man with quote unquote low status and you're down here, you're going to feel kind of out of place. I know that when I step into certain rooms and there's big dogs out here crushing it, whether it's content, fitness, whatever the case may be, sometimes I get a little like, man, but for me, it motivates me, right? That's the kind of stuff that's like, man, I'm going to remember this feeling. I'm going to channel it to go do whatever. And if you're anything like me, you understand exactly what I'm saying, right? So I remember when I was in high school, I started understanding the feeling of being down here on the totem pole, because even though I was more talented at cello and I was like a second string person, like on the second chair in the front row, and there was other people that maybe weren't even as like equally as good at I was at the cello in football, but since they played football, they got more of the perks around me. So once I started understanding that, I was like, okay, so let me see if I can put some of this stuff to the side a little bit, because I just want to live the best life possible. I don't care if it's passion, this, that, a third. I just want to have a good life. So following that, I went from being this orchestra person to trying to be more of an athlete. And thankfully, it didn't work out for me, right? And the reason I'm saying thankfully it didn't work out for me too well was because at the time, I remember really, really, really wanting to get good at these things, but I just couldn't. And that's what taught me the lesson of just understanding how to take a sign from God or the universe. Because if things aren't working for you, and it's not clicking, there's certain things that just come easy to you when you're doing what you're supposed to, right? Like when it comes down to me doing this podcast, not to make it all about me, I promise I'm going to, whatever the case, it is what it is, right? I'm just rambling. Really the biggest thing that I want you all to keep in mind is that this stuff here is easy for me. Me working out is easy for me at this time. Me doing things that are kind of like in my zone of genius are very, very easy. And there's a lot of things in this world that are going to be hard on your journey to success that you're going to have to do anyways, but sometimes you do have to take a hint from whatever you choose to believe in and say, hey, maybe this is not the path. Maybe you just can go down another path also, right? So just understand that there's not one way to get to your end goal. There's a multitude of different ways, and you just have to find the best way to work for you, right? So since I understood that I wanted to be better at sports and I couldn't, I started trying to figure out ways that I could compete in something that I actually had a strong suit for. So not only did I grow up doing music, instruments, whatever the case may be, but I also did martial arts. So I was someone that did karate, I did jiu-jitsu, I did a little bit of judo here and there, kickboxing, boxing, whatever the case may be. And the reason I got into all that stuff is because I actually used to get bullied when I was younger. So since I was bullied for being the more creative kid, my parents were like, hey, we got to make sure that you can stand up for yourself. So then I ended up going into these martial arts things. I learned how to do a thing or two, right? So following that, I started understanding, man, I would probably be really, really good at like wrestling or something. But unfortunately, the town that I'm from, I was born in McAllen. I was raised in Edinburgh. And me living in Edinburgh, it was a city with like 70,000, 80,000 people. And they just didn't have wrestling at the time as a sport. So lo and behold, once senior year came around, I had freshman, sophomore, and junior year of feeling like I was at the bottom of the dominance hierarchy. I felt sad, I felt miserable, I felt isolated. I remember sitting in the tables that I thought were like the lame tables because that's the only crowd that would accept me. And I just remember sitting in those feelings and just kind of like super down with myself, right? And then once it was like sometime like in June or something like before my senior year, actually, it was the June, so it was freshman and sophomore year, I was down there, right? And then half of junior year, I was kind of down there too. But then they made an announcement somewhere in that time period during my junior year that wrestling was going to be a thing. And since I knew that, man, I actually know like a thing or two about this stuff, I started getting very hyped. Now, was I the best wrestler in the world? No, but at least I had a sport that I can at least express myself in and at least be kind of in a cool range around my school, right? So during my junior year, I remember working hard. I did my best with a year of experience, and I ended up missing the quota to actually go compete for like a regional competition. I got pissed because it was like top 4 that go to that competition. I was like number 6, and I was just angry with myself, right? And I was so angry at myself because I knew that if I would have trained harder or if I would have known more, because I had the physicality behind it, I always had good genetics. Thankfully, nowadays I picked the right profession, but at the time, there was just people that just knew more than me. It was like, man, I'm bigger than some of these guys. I'm I know that I have the talent, but it's just I don't have the strategy, right? Which is a big thing that a lot of guys miss. They can have the talent, they can have the raw grit, the determination, whatever the case may be, but if you don't have the strategy, you're not going to get anywhere, right? So what ended up happening is I ended up reaching out to a coach around my area that coached the person that beat me and ended up going like fourth in the state, and he was a stud. And I ended up going to him directly, like, hey, I have a year to get really good at wrestling. I promise I'm going to work my face off. Just help me do this. And he said, okay, well, you're going to be going against guys that are really, really good that have been wrestling since they were like 4 years old, 5 years old. And I was like, yeah, I'm ready. He's like, well, they're going to be throwing you around, and like when you're wrestling, it's only two people. So if you get thrown around and look like a rag doll, it's kind of on you. It's your responsibility. I was like, yeah, I know. I'm ready for it. So, okay, well, that it's going to be harder than anything you've ever done, right? So, yeah, I'm ready for it. So, okay, cool. Let me show you how to do it. So then following that, as soon as we made that decision and he had that conversation with me, I just started understanding how to do this, which is the big, big thing and topic of today's video. I flipped the switch, very simply put, meaning I went from someone that thought he was working hard to being someone that was actually obsessed. I was going to say borderline obsessed, but the truth is that when it comes down to doing anything to maximize your physical potential, it's going to take a level of obsession that some people deem as unhealthy. A lot of people talk about certain things that I've done with fitness or my communication ability. Like, people don't realize how obsessed I've literally been over these things. So much to a point that I can simplify things now. But I remember when I was younger, I couldn't speak right? And thankfully, nowadays it's a blessing for me. But I remember when I was a kid, I couldn't say my R's right. So my name has an R, it's Aaron, but I used to say Edwin. And I think it's because my mother used to baby talk me. And since she used to baby talk me, I think I said Edwin because she was like, oh, my little baby Edwin. So I think I just started speaking like that. And then you turn like 8 years old. It's like, okay, this isn't cute anymore. Like, you got to kind of talk like a human. So following that, I remember, just to keep on the little side tangent, I remember with speaking, I had to actually get really, really good at it. And I was practicing tongue twisters over and over and over and over. And then since I got good at speaking, I just never really stopped doing those tongue twisters. So even before I do these things, I'm always doing that. When it comes down to me speaking with friends, I just go with the flow and see what happens. And it's taken me a really long time to develop like a certain kind of communication style. And when it comes down to my fitness, I've been working out since I was like 10 years old, right? And I'm 26. So that's 16 years, that's over a decade and a half of experience of me lifting recreationally, not including the years I've worked as a professional in the fitness industry since about 2017. So when it comes down to doing anything, it's really comes down to obsession and how long are you willing to wait? Like, are you being able to be patiently, aggressively, are you able to patiently execute in an aggressive manner long term? And if you can be able to outwork people and outweight people, and outlast people that typically give up on the journey, then you're going to succeed more than most people ever can dream of, right? So that's just really the secret that I wanted to kind of break down for you also. But since I flipped the switch during that time in my senior year, I started just focusing on how can I outwork the next person. That was my whole paradigm. And then it was like, okay, well, if I go to school and I'm wrestling 5 days a week, let me see if I can make practice 5 days a week there. So I went from having 5 practices in a week to 10 practices in a week. Okay, so now I'm working out 10 times. How can I work out more? Because I'm trying to collapse time as much as possible. So it went from 10 workouts a week and say, okay, well, what if I do sprints every single morning? So that's 7 extra sprinting sessions a week. And then maybe instead of sprinting, maybe I did like a run here or there to kind of like give my body some rest. So, okay, so that's still 7 extra workouts. So that's 10 plus 7. So that's 17. And then say, for example, I did 3 lifting sessions. That's 20 workouts a week. And say, for example, I also did some technicality things, like technical form stuff. That's 7 workouts a week. And let's say I did flexibility stuff too. That is, 34? So my 34 workouts a week, not all of them were strenuous, but I would consider, I consider anything that's like preparing you for those events that you're doing, whether it's stretching, reading a book. I would even consider like watching tape of like some of these wrestlers that would screenshot each and every single little frame to learn their moves. So, okay, so he has his foot at this angle and then he loops around here and then he goes here and then he does this. All these little things I was just like obsessed with. So then my 40 workouts compared to the next person's 5, or my 40 training sessions, if you want to call it that, whether they're physical or mental, because I would even do visualization and stuff. My 40 workouts compared to your 5, if we compound that over a year, I'm pretty much caught up to anyone who's worked out, who's done wrestling over the past 4 years kind of thing, right? So because of that, I got really, really, really good my senior year. But unfortunately, since I was working so hard and I didn't understand things like recovery, and I was also kind of anxiously working out too, to the point where I was just trying to make that number 40 go to 41, and yeah, eventually your body gives out on you, right? So I ended up tearing my ACL, my PCL, and my LCL on my left knee. And when that happened, it felt like my whole world just blew up in front of my face, right? And the reason it blew up in front of my face is because I also made what I did my identity, which was like a big, big problem on another side tangent I want to kind of discuss too, because at the time, I thought I was a wrestler. Aaron didn't exist. I was a wrestler. And to a certain extent, there are people that have to do those things, but it just depends on what kind of person you want to be. Because even when I first built my business, I was an online personal trainer, right? And recently, business has grown to a really cool extent, and I've been able to kind of detach. I'm still kind of doing what I got to do, right? But I've been able to develop Aaron the person versus Aaron the professional to a certain degree that I urge every single one of you all to take. Because sometimes when you take your identity in what you do, you end up treating a lot of people poorly along the way because you see the whole world as just a competition. When a view that served me a little bit more is that whatever's created everything around us created you for a specific reason, and it's not about you versus the next person. It's just about you fulfilling your assignment. And whatever your assignment is, whether it's a level 1 thing, a level 10 thing, if you fulfill it, that's all that matters. Rick Ross has this awesome quote that says, I don't want a dollar more than what my capacity is. Here's what Rick Ross says, just to keep it very, very accurate, as accurate as I can recall off top. He says, I want every dollar that belongs to me that I'm capable of getting, not a penny more and not a penny less. So if he's someone that was capable of $100 million or $1 billion, he doesn't want $1,001,001, and he doesn't want $999,999, right? He wants every single dollar that he can achieve by himself, right? So I think that's where just understanding capacity and just kind of reaching that by yourself can make things so much easier for you long term. Because if you're always comparing yourself to the person on your left, to your right, or in your center, or the person you used to be, or the person you can be, you forget to look at what's in front of you, right? So I think sometimes instead of looking at the home runs we're about to, hey, we just got to get to first base first. And once we get to first base, second, third, and once you're on third, go for the home run. But don't worry about all the extra stuff that can happen. You can take those things into account, but don't let that stop you from taking that next best step in the direction of your goals, right? So when I flipped the switch and it went poorly for me, for a long time, I let that mess with me because I was so kind of like traumatized at that time, because it was like I gave it my everything. I had all these kind of schools and scholarships lined up. I tried going back to these schools because I was a second-year wrestler. I had all the talent. I could have. I sound like Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite, you know what I mean? But I had like all the tangible skills that I knew if I was put in the room, they would have let me do what I had to do. But since I didn't win, and I was a second-year wrestler, and I had some cool tape, but there was like, we can't give this kid a chance because the only people we saw him go against were like people that were around my area, and while my area was cool, they weren't necessarily top state competitors, to say the least, right? So because of that, it was a little bit like, we haven't seen you against a good person yet, right? And I was injured, so I couldn't even do anything, right? So they ended up all saying no. I ended up going back to school in my hometown called the UTRGV. And while I was cool here and there, like when it comes down to grades, and I behaved to an extent, I was kind of a party animal, man. I'll be honest. And the reason I was partying so much is because I was trying to kind of numb the pain of kind of that failure. And then at the time, I also was talking to that chick. I was like 18 years old. Your testosterone's all the way up, and you know how that stuff goes. And I just kind of lost it internally for a little bit. So where I was just going out every single night and drinking. I was smoking. I was taking pills. I was doing all these things. And I remember to the point where sometimes I would wake up inside of my first car that I had. I had a Hyundai Accent. And I remember sleeping sometimes. I would just wake up in my car like this, if you're watching on YouTube. Which, by the way, Spotify, Apple, I got you covered, man. You can listen to this too. If you're listening to this, shout out to you. I love you, man. Make sure you keep on listening, because this whole thing wouldn't be possible without you. But let's get back to the story. So that's how it would be. I would just wake up like, man, what's going on? And it was a very frightening thing for me, because I remember I would wake up just in like parking lots outside of houses where these things with like windows open, and nothing happened to my car by the grace of God, man. And it was just wicked, bro. And sometimes I would wake up just because I would black out. That's the whole story for those of you all that don't know about alcohol. Like when you drink too much of it, It does something to your brain to where it just shuts off your memory, and then you go about life, and then or you go about the night not even doing anything. So I remember talking to my friends, and at the time they ended up saying, "Aaron, bro, you should have seen yourself, man. You were out here doing this, this, and this." And they make it out to seem like it was a fun night, but I was like, man, you're destroying yourself sip by sip, and it's just like, especially when you take it too far, because I was just taking it too far. Like, I think there's definitely a healthy balance with alcohol if you want to find that for yourself. Nowadays, I don't drink at all. It's not like a thing. You know what I mean? I just don't drink. It's like one of those things like you don't see scary movies just because it's just not your thing. That's one of those things for me. It's not like a superiority complex over anyone. I love everyone. I have friends on both spectrums to where I have friends that are like super anti-alcohol. I also have friends that are woo, and I also have friends that are just kind of in the middle. And then like I'm here, that's just like I just don't do it, right? But really, when it comes down to the whole party stuff, I used to do this stuff and I just used to black out, and I just used to wake up on couches, and I remember sometimes I had like red stains on my shirt because I was supposedly having Cheetos, and if you know how that works, man, it's disgusting, bro. And I would just wake up on couches, and by the grace of God, nothing terrible happened to me besides, being embarrassed by everyone around me, which that stuff spreads, right? So during that period of time, I was numbing all the pain with all these substances that weren't necessarily the best for me long term. And since I was doing all these things that were far below my standard, guess what ended up happening? My confidence ended up going down, my self-esteem ended up going down, and I ended up just becoming a shadow of the version of myself that I always knew that I could be. Because at one point, I wanted to be this all-star wrestler, I wanted to be in the UFC, I wanted to be this MMA fighter, but what ended up happening is I let myself down. And I didn't even let myself down because of, the outcome of my need. Like, I let myself down because of the reaction I had to that. Because instead of just me getting better, me proactively understanding life happens, I put so much weight in my identity based around the outcome of what I was doing that when that fell down, my whole life fell apart, So I went down this whole cycle to where once that happened, I then had to figure out how to get jobs. So then I was doing, because I left school, I wasn't the best in school. So because I ended up doing poorly in school and I didn't want to continue for my second year in university, what I ended up doing instead is I actually started working in like restaurant stuff. So I was like a server, I would be a host. And then after that, ended up doing construction work. So I was a construction worker for a little bit for my uncle's business, and I was terrible at it, right? And then following that, I ended up just figuring out, okay, I need to do something with what I enjoy doing. At the time I was making music, I wasn't necessarily the best at it, but it was something fun for me to do. And then I realized that I really wanted to, more than anything else, I wanted to be in like fitness. And the reason I wanted to be in fitness is because I knew the power of me working out when I was young and me just understanding things at a pretty fundamental level. Because even back when I was a server, a host, construction worker, I was still working out. I wasn't the most in shape, but the reason I would let myself get out of shape is because I was so good at fitness that I knew that I can get back in shape at a whim's notice, right? So because I had that skill, I decided, okay, well, let me just go ahead and use that skill to start putting money in my bank account, right? So I started becoming a personal trainer. Following me being a personal trainer, I ended up moving to Austin. When I moved to Austin, I was sleeping in my truck for a little bit, and I was sleeping in my truck because I underestimated how much it would cost for me to live by myself, right? So I was sleeping in my truck, saved enough money, started couch surfed enough to start paying at a really nice couch. I was actually living in downtown Austin for a little bit with a buddy of mine that girlfriend broke up with him. He needed someone to pay half the rent, and I was there. I was like, hey, I got you covered. So I was still couch surfing, but it was a nice couch downtown Austin. So after that whole thing kind of fell apart because I just had like a mental breakdown, low key, because I didn't, I had depression still, man. I had all these things going on, and I was taking some things I shouldn't have been taking also. Like I was taking steroids because I wanted to get bigger. So once I wasn't taking them responsibly, so I'm sure my hormones were getting all jacked up, right? So because my hormones got really jacked up, what I ended up deciding to do is I went back home. I called my mom, like, hey, Mom, I'm in a really bad space. Is there any way I can move back home and just kind of rebuild from there? And she was like, Aaron, we would love to have you back. Let's get you squared away. So I ended up going to a psychiatrist at the time, and he got me on medications that I needed. He did everything responsibly. I know I always talk about me being on 5 different prescription medications. For those of you all that don't know how psychiatry works, like that stuff is actually like real and stuff. I don't think I ever got anything that was prescribed to me out of like what people talk about big pharma. Like I know my psychiatrist. He's a former psychiatrist. He's a good dude. Him and I always kind of on Instagram, right? So yeah, when it comes down to all that stuff, guys, when I was down in the dumps and I was trying to figure out, once I moved back home, I was trying to rebuild my life. I was working out again. Confidence still wasn't high. Still wasn't talking to the people that I wanted to. And I had to, that was like a cycle that went on for years at that point. It was so bad that once the pandemic hit, I ended up having to hit a crossroads, because when social distancing became a thing and people were talking about, hey guys, we got to social distance because of COVID, literally, guys, nothing in my life changed at all. And that's when I knew I had a problem, because if I didn't change something about my life, I was going to stay the same exact way and things were just going to get terrible for me. I've always had that good foresight. So much so that I remember thinking to myself, if everyone's complaining about my actual lifestyle, then maybe I do have a problem. Because at the time I was fine. I was fine just watching YouTube videos. I was fine doing this, fine doing that, if you know what I mean. And I didn't need to change because I was cool. And so because I realized that in order for me to change my life, I was going to have to change things in my life, I started understanding that I had to do the same thing I did in high school. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I understood the mindset it takes in order for me to go from A to B. And I was hesitant to do it. But then I started reading more books. I started eliminating all the distractions out of my life. And then I started building momentum more so than anything else. And then once you can flip the switch, it's not necessarily like an immediate thing, man. Like, it's something that takes a little bit of time. Because first it starts with doing one thing right. And when you do the one thing right, and you do that for 7 days, the next 7 days add another thing, which is that's how you build momentum, by the way. To where, say for example, your whole life's a mess, no structure, whatever the case may be. For 1 week, just wake up on time. And then for that, don't focus on any of the other things you want to do. Next week, do some deep work. Schedule 4 hours of deep work, uninterrupted. You're just doing what you got to do. Then week after that, schedule in some little like foundational habits that make you a better person. That's journaling, reading, that's meditation, whatever you're into that can kind of make everything else better. Those are foundational habits, or even amplifying habits if you want to break it down like that, because they amplify everything else in your life. But the biggest thing that I learned is that there's no real secret when it comes down to changing your life. Like when it comes down to building momentum, it's really you just sitting down with yourself and understanding the importance of accepting where you're at. You don't necessarily have to like it. You don't have to love it. You don't even have to hate it, but you just have to accept it. And once you accept it, you can change it from there if you have the willpower and the kind of the resources and the strategy to go ahead and do so, right? So flipping the switch for me, guys, has done so much for me. I want to actually go ahead and transition into a video that I recorded the other day. So for those of you all that don't know, for a little personal update, I moved to Houston very recently. So this is my new spot. I'm kind of holding off on getting furniture for the time being. Looking at my little husky, man. She was acting up earlier. I guess she just wants to see her daddy. How you doing, baby? Ow. No, she's coming over here to distract me a little more, but it is what it is. Not distract me, but she just wants lovins. But when it comes down to it, I moved out here to Houston. And I'm really loving the environment, man. I moved out here. I've been trying to work up to it for the last year and some change, maybe even 2 years if you want to take it down to me knowing that I had to go to a bigger city to maximize my potential, right? For those of you all that have been following me for any minute, I've been living in my hometown for the longest time. I was modeling people that stayed in their hometown and they still made their business grow. But I just know that with my set of gifts, I can definitely play this game a little bit differently, to say the least, right? So I'm out here in Houston, meeting a whole bunch of cool people, and life has been molding itself around me in so incredible, such an incredible way, right? And right now, with episode 1 of it back and revamping, I didn't want to make like a whole intro episode to where like intro episodes sometimes get a little, in my opinion, I still want it to have like some value in there for you. Right now, I'm flipping the switch, to be honest with you guys, right? Like the whole point of this podcast, guys, before we show the clip that my mom ended up, a conversation between my mother and I ended up having like a little big, deep moment of clarity very recently. And the reason being is because Q1 for business was the biggest quarter we've ever had so far at Basics, right? Which is my online personal training business. And I didn't post the most content I've ever posted, frankly, like 0 damn near. And the reason being is because I was just helping people directly. I was like, you know what? I just want to be in this to help people. So I just started helping more people that I knew, and then, hey, do you have a friend kind of thing? And business did great. And what ended up happening is I started understanding that not everyone's going to necessarily have the ability to get a product or a service from myself or any of my ventures moving forward. but that doesn't mean that they don't deserve my help. And the reason being is because we only live once, man. Shout out to Drizzy Drake. So because of that, I want to do my best to provide as much value as I possibly can in every single medium possible. So whether you are just watching my YouTube channel or you're watching my podcast, again, there are two different things. You can check out my YouTube below for fitness and nutrition stuff and some self-improvement. This is going to be the podcast where it's just more so about Aaron the person. And I ended up realizing that I just want to help people out to the best of my ability in whichever domain that they come to me in. So whether it's on content, whether they message me, whether I meet them in person, whether you get a product or service from me, I just want to give you 100% on myself in any way, shape, or form. Because again, we only live once, and because of that, I want to just do my absolute best to maximize the time that I'm going to be alive, man. I've been reading a lot of stoicism about like, man, just accept death is coming, and then you'll live a better life, things of that nature, and it's just been really resonating and hitting a chord with me. So, flipping the switch for me, guys, has done so many incredible things, and just understanding that you can change your life just in an instant, guys. You don't need your entire life or your backstory to be perfect before you start succeeding in anything, because it really just takes that first step, man. Once you can understand that journey that's going to take 1,000 miles begins with that one step, and then you can just take the second one and the third one and the fourth one, and you just don't stop and you just keep chipping away. Eventually, you're going to get there. And I think what ends up happening is that in our generation, we've forgotten about how long it takes to actually succeed, just due to the instant gratification culture we're in when it comes down to social media, when it comes down to everything, when it comes down to food. It's like, if you want food, you can drive 5 minutes, now you're eating. Back in the caveman days, which is still kind of how we're wired to a certain extent, we used to have to kill for days, and that's why people make arguments about fasting. If you don't want a video about that, I can definitely do so, because I know quite a bit of that stuff, just because I'm a fitness guy, you know what I mean? So, back then, man, we ended up having to hunt for days, and our body actually performs better when it's hungry to a certain extent. If you look at some of the most high performers in the world, they actually like working when they're hungry because of what the brain does and the ideas and stuff. Nipsey Hussle has this line in Perfect Timing, says that when you get hungry, that affects your brain. So you got to understand how that stuff works, but that's another story for another day. But yeah, guys, I'm going to go ahead and cue a clip that my mother made just so I can show you all that I'm, me making these kind of content videos and stuff, like, I'm not the person that's always had things figured out, is what I'm trying to say, right? Like, I want to actually provide you all value with this show and help you out to the best of my ability, man. Because before I was a trainer, I was a person that was lost. And I'm going to go ahead and cue the video that my mother actually, I recorded it with my mother telling me things about where I was at before. Check it out. No, that's what I'm seeing. It's like I'm around these people that are really, really crushing it. And just seeing it is very... It's just very inspiring.
But you know what, Aaron? I don't know if I say this enough, but you're crushing it. I mean, when I think about you, gosh, sweetheart, we were so worried about you for so many years. So many years where that depression, that whatever it was that you were, like the demons. I remember that one kid that from wrestling at Pioneer said it, and when he said it and you repeated it, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, he's completely right. Mm-hmm. It's like, what demons are you fighting? Mm-hmm. And you fought those demons for so many years. I mean, through all that darkness, the depression, the anger, messing around the way you did, and then trying to get a handle of it through medications, heavy medications that you had bottles all over the place, terrified me half to death. Mm-hmm. You stopped that. You quit it on your own, by yourself. It's like, Aaron, people don't do that kind of stuff. You've got to realize that you are so different, and the battles you fought are going to help you in the road that you're going. So never look at someone and say, I want to be like that, because, oh my gosh, people don't measure up there. You have been through so much, and you've gotten through all by yourself.
Thank you.
So don't, like I said, just don't look up to others, because you're just incredible. You're just an amazing kid. You're creative. You're well-spoken. Your heart has opened up in this last year and a half in just an incredible way. It's like almost a different person from like when the time that you were with to now. oh my gosh, it's like you are a complete better person than you were back then.
Thank you.
So,
I feel it too. Thank you, Mom. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Now, if you saw that video, first and foremost, I apologize for the quality. When she was speaking, I just pulled up the camera on my laptop and I just went ahead and recorded it, because sometimes you have those conversations to where it's like, man, it's going to be like a good one that I don't ever want to forget. So I have a few of those in my Apple thing. But yeah, I used to be lost, man. I used to be kind of down, stuck, frustrated, isolated, and just not happy with the way that my life was going down. So because I wasn't happy, my entire vibrational state, if you want to look at things from a quantum physics standpoint, was just attracting more unhappy people, right? And even when I was seeing a form of success, when I still had momentum, I was also I still had like low vibrational stuff coming into my life because of the energy I was still putting out there. I made that mistake, but we live and we learn. I've gotten better because of everything in my life, and I couldn't be any happier with where things are going moving forward. So thank you all very much for your support. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. If you are brand new to my channel, go ahead and like this video and subscribe for the new episodes frequently. I'm not going to say the cadence. I already have the cadence in my head. I've already committed to it. I've already written the contract to myself to show you all that I'm dependable with this content stuff, because these podcasts I can knock out easy peasy, lemon squeezy. But when it comes down to other kind of formats, it takes a little bit of time with the editing, and I think I'll have to look for editors, yada, 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 chitter, chatter. Still want to make those videos because I understand filmmaking and cinematography, and I really appreciate that craft. But when it comes down to me making content, I'm still going to, we're going to just fucking crush it, bro. I'm just going to keep it a buck. But in order to see that happen, just like this video, comment your favorite part of this episode, and subscribe to this channel because we got new stuff coming frequently, like I said. Make sure that you listen to us on Spotify, Apple, and all the other stuff that you see on the Anchor website down below. And if you are looking to get in the best shape of your life, go ahead and feel free to book a free 15-minute game plan call with myself personally to go ahead and fill out an application to see whether or not you qualify for one of our VIP online coaching programs, where we'll make your workout program for you. We'll dial in your nutrition. We'll make sure that you don't have to sacrifice your favorite foods, and we'll hold you accountable throughout the week with group coaching calls, one-on-one text support, and one-on-one Zoom support as well for myself and our other coach that we have here at Basics, right? And yeah, if you want to go and subscribe to our newsletter too, that'll be below also. And if you want to go and see how I went from average to alpha within about a year, and I figured out a way to make that process into actually 16 weeks, 90 days, just depending on your strategy, your body fat percentage. I could take my actual 13-year transformation into your potentially 16-week transformation with just a few clicks here and there. Go in and watch my free webinar down below. The time I'm recording this video, the link is not live yet, but it will be in due time. That's the next project that we're working on. So thank you all very much. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for support. And we're going to crush. And if no one's told you in a minute, I'll tell you right now, it's time to get your shit together, man. See ya.